these critics that they say that Milton was not able or did not have this ability, they believe that his failure has been due to two things. One of them is choice of topics, which somehow preclude recurrence to common experience, and the unwillingness of the modern mind to have any demands made on this credence or its morals. It is rather vain, to hope, as one of the critics said, that the reading of Milton will help to restore high moral standards. And here again, if you want to make a comparison with the other poets like Shakespeare, maybe it is misleading because of somehow this human situations from local conditions and giving them a universal appeal. But we have to become more acquainted with his work, in this sense. Okay. Even the things said with the Paradise Lost, we see that as Johnson also says that it is a duty rather than a pleasure. We read Milton for instruction, overburdened, and look elsewhere for recreation. But we see that before deciding whether this is a judgment on the weakness of the poem or this is the limitation of the reader, we should keep in our mind that intense religious feelings is little concerned with the reader's convenience. And we should recognize the common weaknesses of men who desire their prayers to be longer, who consider prayers as a form of recreation. But it is with a knowledge of Milton's purpose that we can discuss the question of the style that he has used, as he has touched all the controversies against his poems and his works. Now, we can also say that the sentences he used, the ideas that he used, the points of comparisons he has made in his works are so, let's say, important as a whole regarding his poems. And also the language that he used. We see that Milton lived and worked in three different words, we can say, with the various fronts, the medieval, the Renaissance, the Puritan. So it is his great achievement to bring all these three into his work, to harmonize the range of medieval beliefs with the seriousness, with the responsibility of the Puritan mind, and the Renaissance discussions of the good life and the ideal state. So these are the things that made his verse as one of the great vehicles which we have to know about, the cultural, religious, and political vitality of his time. Okay, again with Milton, I will go through some of the lines later on, but I would like to give a brief let's say, background you see of the age, we see that like Iliad, it takes place on two levels: conflicts in heaven and conflict on earth. Lucifer, one of the chief angels in the hierarchy of heaven, rebelled against God and was thrown down to hell with his followers. In consequence, God created the earth and made man its ruler, with one condition, that he refrain from eating the fruit of one tree in the Garden of Eden. Lucifer, that is, you see, the Satan or the devil, to revenge himself on God, tricked men into breaking God's command and eating the forbidden fruit. Man was then driven from paradise and damaged the whole created order of which he was the head. The sources of the paradise lost are found, you see, in the Bible, which Milton, let's say, follows closely as explained and interpreted by Christian and Jewish theologians in particular. We have St. Augustine in the City of God. We have to prepare ourselves by reading, by taking the few moments needed to review these sources, to read these, pages. For the creation and the fall of man, we have in Genesis, some parts of the Genesis. For the war in heaven, the revelation, by the hints that we may find in these books and pages. For Milton, this narrative is the focus for the body of the ideas about God and about man, and therefore about the relation of man to God and to each other. By this, I do not mean that we are obliged to accept Milton's ideas and Milton's version of these ideas. So we have our own, let's say, general notion on the idea to understand the situation. But to understand the poem, we have to know these lines. Yes, that is the God to the lowest, that is, the angel. Each creature had, let's say, a double obligation toward the creature, that is the above, or to the below in the creation. The creatures in it were good in so far as they fulfill the obligations made by God. In the case of spiritual and intellectual beings, that is, the angel and man, by reason. For angels and men were free, capable of fulfilling their obligations to love and to worship and to obey God, or of not choosing it. Disorder in any part of the creation, Sama, is another, way. When men, the head of this creation, turned from God, the result was ruin throughout. When this action, happened, the Adam's fall, God's justice required that man be wiped out, as Satan had been earlier, and his mercy permitted man to survive and made it possible for God's Son to reestablish man's relationship with God by perfect obedience that overcome Adam's disobedience. You see, very close to Muslims, you see, ideas as well. But we see that this Trinitarian God of traditional Christianity, that is the Father, the Son, that is the Christ, and the Holy Spirit. It is the difference between, see, the ideas among the Christians and Muslims. But in his private beliefs, Milton was not, you see, an orthodox in this respect with regard to the three persons of the Trinity. But in Paradise Lost, he followed the generally view of majority of Christians. God's predestination of particular men to salvation or to damnation. Milton departs from his own party, though not from traditional Christianity. He insisted while God, being omniscient, must know in advance the destiny of each person, the individual himself remains free to choose God or Satan, to choose, you see, good or evil. Milton clearly followed the Bible, and with these biblical, you see, doctrines, we can find all these issues in the Paradise Lost. They somehow expressed in the language of the Bible. Even we do not know exactly whether Milton takes the Bible narrative of the creation and the fall to be literally true. See, in one sense we can say yes, in one sense we can say no, but probably did not accept it as expressing the final truth about God. Rather, since God is infinite and man's intelligence is, on the contrary, finite, the Bible tells only as much about God as man is capable of understanding. The same idea also, or the same point, can be made about Paradise Lost itself. For example, the war in heaven between the good and the evil angels does not necessarily portray the final reality. It shows us the conflict in human terms, in a form resembling the human wars with which we are familiar. Milton's universe, which is the Word, is also the traditional universe with the earth at the center and the stars and the planets around it in different, you see, spheres, which are conceived as, you see, the permeable in this, you see, regard. This is a kind of thing that is known as the ancient Ptolemaic scheme, which he was familiar with the newer, you see, Copernican system, that Earth is not at the center. The sun is at the center, and all the other planets go around, you see, the star. So through it, we can find that in Italy, meeting, you see, Galileo, whose observation supported Copernicus. The best reason is probably that the ideas of Copernicus and Galileo were still too new and not supported by see, the people in this regard. So we have to be so patient in this regard, even particularly if the reader is not experienced. If we are familiar with the man's idea, with God, with the overall story, we see that the idea is very close, is very familiar, and we are able to read and understand it. In book 1 of the Paradise Lost, we see that it is an epic, as it is known. An epic as you see the elevated language and sublime style in describing the situation, like what we can find in Homer or in Virgil. This is somehow very close to this, and this is somewhat creative. And in book 1, he asked God's help in presenting his immense subject, man-sin, through which he lost Eden, or the paradise, and brought death into the world. And with God's help, he will be equal to his subject and justify the ways of God to men. Help men to understand the reasons behind God's actions in history. Now I go to some of the lines of this, you see, epic, the Paradise Lost, and read some of these lines for you. Okay. Of men's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the sacred top of Oreb, this is God appeared in a burning bush on Mount Oreb.